God is not biased towards any experience or part of itself because it is an infinite mind. As an infinite mind, it must embrace and accept all of the things it can imagine, since it is itself. God can have no biases. And the reason that is because literally the physical differences or distinctions that separate all objects are imagined by God. Therefore, they have no real existence or objective reality. That means that literally in the mind of God, the difference between a kangaroo and a sushi and a piece of turd doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. These differences only appear to exist within the human mind. Therefore, God can embrace all of its forms. All forms are embraced within the mind of God and arise from the one mind of God. After all, why would God have any biases? If everything is one, if all difference is imaginary, how can any one part of reality be better or more important than any other part? Here's an analogy to help you to understand this. Because see, there's a isomorphism between God's infinite mind and your mind, because actually they're literally identical. But anyways, you think they're different. So we're taking it from your point of view. From your point of view, still there's an isomorphism, a similarity, an analogy we're going to draw here, right? So your mind can think thoughts, and it can think any kind of thoughts. Think some thoughts right now. Notice that your mind is thinking thoughts, whatever they are. You can think of a cow, of a kangaroo, of a sushi, of a turd, of an apple, of a tree, of a house. It doesn't matter. These are all thoughts. Now, notice when your mind is thinking thoughts, the actual mind space within which thoughts arise, your mind space, we might call this pure mind, free of any thoughts or forms, that empty mind space, does it care which thought you think? Like, you can think of a kangaroo right now. Close your eyes, think of a kangaroo. Notice that it freely enters into your mind, into the mind space. Now clear that image and now think of a dog turd. That image, that form has entered into your mind space. And notice that it entered as freely as the kangaroo. Now, maybe you have a little bit of squeamishness. You don't like thinking of a dog turd. You might even have a little bit of revulsion towards it. Well, that's some resistance. Notice that that's some bias you might have. But if you're truly open-minded, then literally your mind can think any kind of thoughts. Like, your mind doesn't care whether you're thinking the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't care. All of these thoughts are equivalent from the perspective of sort of the empty mind space. And so now you can just extrapolate and notice that since no thought is better than any other thought, literally within your own mind, all of these mental forms or images are arising. They're arising from an emptiness. And as they arise, they separate themselves from each other. That's what it means to arise from emptiness. Like, literally from emptiness, a kangaroo, the form of a kangaroo is differentiating itself and holding itself as a mental image, and then a dog turd, and then a piece of sushi or an apple or whatever. That's what's happening when you're thinking thoughts. If you introspect, that's what you'll discover. And if you're truly open-minded, you can love all those thoughts equally. There's no reason that one thought is better than another thought. Now, you could say, well, but Leo, some thoughts are kind of gross and I don't like them. Like, I don't like the thought of having sex with my mother. Whereas I love the thought of having sex with some person that I find attractive. Again, those are your biases. If you remove those biases, then you're just very neutral about it. Stop playing games. Stop being emotional and just be neutral. And you'll notice that you can think any kind of thought without getting attached to it or without any, prejudice for or against it. And you can enjoy that. You can literally enjoy sitting there thinking different kinds of thoughts. It's just interesting. Like, I can think of a kangaroo right now. That's kind of cool. I can think of a dog turd, and I can even appreciate, the thought of a dog turd. It doesn't. It's not like I like it or anything, but it's like I don't have to hate it either. It's just kind of interesting that I can do that. It might be useful to be able to think of a dog turd once in a while. If I got to clean up some shit, it's useful to remember that. So, I'm not talking about the utility of these thoughts. Some thoughts have more utility to you than others. But again, notice that's only because you have certain biases, which determine what the utility of a thing is. But if you have no utility for anything, and after all, does God have a utility for things? Does God need a fucking hammer to hammer in a nail? You see, in the mind of God, anything that arises in the mind of God has no utility. In the same way that thoughts in your mind, they really have no utility. You could use them, but you don't have to. And so anyways, the analogy we're drawing here is that just like your mind is free to have all these different thoughts, likewise, God's mind is free to imagine literally any physical form that it wants. And it doesn't love one form. Like, God doesn't love a kangaroo more than it loves a dog turd lying on the street. So, in a sense, we're realizing what mind is. Mind is an infinite field that's completely open and unbiased, which is open to creative imagination. That's what mind is. It's open to any figment of itself, any part of itself. And since it's infinite, it has all the possible parts. In other words, what mind is self-love. You get it? Love is not an emotion. Love is the actual substance of your mind before it has been corrupted with attachments and biases. Now notice, as soon as your mind wants some imaginary thing to persist, it has to acquire a bias. For example, if you want your dog to live a long life, you got to be attached to that dog and have a bias towards feeding your dog, saving your dog from a fire, and other things like that. If you want your child to live, same situation. If you want your body to be healthy and to survive and to persist, you also have to develop biases for your body. You got to feed it the right things, avoid eating the wrong things, and so on. Avoid jumping into a fire, avoid jumping into a pit of lava. If you want your pleasure to persist, let's say you're having an orgasm or whatever, and you want that to just continue over and over and over again, you have to be biased towards doing the activities that will produce that pleasure again and again and again. And in this way, you become biased. You become biased towards pleasure and biased away from pain and from suffering. So now you can see the connection between bias and attachment. Anything you become attached to as a form will then create a bias in you. And then even if you get detached from that form, that bias can still remain. For example, you could get attached to your dog. That develops a bias for caring for your dog. Then your dog will die in 10 years. You'll be sad, but you'll get over it. You'll lose your attachment for that dog. You'll let go of the dog, but you will still maintain your bias for taking care of dogs instinctively. And then even your neighbor's dog, you will take care of it. And then if you get a new dog or if your kids get a dog, you'll take care of that. The bias can remain. Now, you've heard it say, I'm sure you have, that spirituality is about letting go of attachments. But do you understand why that is? Most people don't understand. But now that you've heard what I've been talking about, now you're in a position to understand, see? Because every attachment you have is a bias, and bias prevents you from realizing the truth that everything is equally good. Literally, the more attachments you have, the more limited your perception of reality is, the more biases you have, the more limited your capacity for love is, and the more you suffer as a result.